Yo, 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 yo. What up, everybody? Welcome to the Cars and Kicks podcast. I am Jacques Slate. As you can tell, I'm in a pretty good mood today. And it's because we're doing the podcast. I got two of my good buddies here,
Yeah.
Nick and Erik. I should let them do their own intros, but I'm doing them today. Got a nice lineup of things to talk about today, something that I'm super interested in. And I'm really looking forward to getting these guys' perspective on it because they know a little bit more about that world. And then talking about something that I think everyone really, I feel like it's something that everyone has done. And if that's not a teaser to keep you listening for the rest of the episode, I don't know what we've got to do.
That was gold.
Nick also takes off his San Francisco Giants hat and puts on a Dodger hat. That's a lie. He would never. That's a lie.
Nick's actually got a good head of hair. He just never. It's just a different color.
Never shows it. Never shows it because he has this allegiance to this team for some reason. Anyway, Cars and Kicks. Let's get into it. Again, I'm Jacques Slate, but I couldn't do this show by myself. I have these two incredible gentlemen who are on my screen or to the right, but depending on how you see it, they could be here or they could. I'm sorry, stuff you don't need to know. Erik, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let them know what's going on.
Yo, thank you for that energy, by the way, because it's we're doing this kind of late today. You guys can't tell, but it's like 10 o'clock p.m. here in the Dallas, Texas area, and I normally go to bed at like 9:30 or 10 because I got a 6-year-old that I have to wake up every morning for school. So I might be a little groggy. I might be drinking a little bit of wine this episode just to help wind me down.
A little bit of wine,
but it's a nightcap. It's a nightcap. But no, on a tangent here. Yeah, I'm Erik. I'm the car guy here amongst other car guys that on the Cars and Kicks podcast. I do know a little bit about sneakers, but that is where Jacques and Nick kind of take over. Nick is the expert in all things Cars and Kicks. So Nick, tell everybody a little bit more about yourself.
Somebody's going to put me to the test one day on that, and I'm going to be so disappointing to them. They're just going to be like, "What? Like you don't know?" No, I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, my name's Nick Engvall. Just kind of love both of these things too much, but the show makes it totally acceptable to spend most of my days thinking about these two things. Also, as Erik was saying, he's having a glass of wine. I was thinking, I hope that our show evolves to that point where like we've got like an hour, 2-hour episodes where, we're having drinks and by the end of the show, one of us is buying a car or something like that. That's where I think we want to get to.
That is so.
That would be incredible.
You're saying we need to dethrone Rogan in order to do that. The 3-hour pod where we end up just randomly Googling something and dropping $300K on a 911 or something. I like that. I like that for us. Yes,
we probably
here
need
for
some
it.
sponsors for that to happen.
Yeah, we need sponsors to help make that happen. Before we get to the show, just a random question, and this is golf related, not necessarily Cars and Kicks related. Like, how long after Masters are you allowed to wear Masters gear? Is that like a year-long thing, or does because the reason I'm asking, because I bought a bunch of things when I was at the Masters, and I'm like, can I still wear this? Is it like too late now? Am I past
I think it's evergreen. I think that Masters stuff is evergreen because it is consistently going to be a conversation piece.
Yep.
And so, you're going to have all the hype around it for probably a week or two after the Masters, and you're wearing a hat or whatever, you walk in somewhere and somebody's like, yeah, Rory had a hell of a final round, didn't he? And you're like, yeah, he did, blah, blah, blah. And you can go that. But, where it gets really dope is like if you have some Masters gear from like, say 2-3 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever, and then that conversation piece or that conversation becomes this whole other thing because it's kind of like the stuff that we love, the cars, the kicks or whatever. If you see a brand new pair of sneakers or somebody roll up in a brand new car or whatever, it's cool. But if you see somebody with something that's vintage, in this case like a vintage Masters hat or shirt or whatever, it's you can talk, oh yeah, that was the year that Tiger did this and that. Yeah, it was. I was there, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, I feel like that's a long-winded way of saying, nah, it's evergreen. You can wear Masters stuff year-round, in my opinion.
Okay, all right. Well, that helps eliminate some of my insecurities. Thank you, Erik. I appreciate that. But on a more relevant topic, Slate truck to be specific. I feel like like there was a lot of energy around it when it kind of first got announced, but now that the pre-orders are open, I feel like it's just everywhere and everyone is talking about it. And like, I get it, but then like, I don't get it. I feel like, okay, it's cool that you can pre-order this truck and you can do all these customizations to it, but it looks like a really tiny truck and it doesn't get a lot of miles. So what am I missing here that other people are just like, Slate, bro, Slate?
Man, that opens up a whole can of worms here. I think I think first of all, I think the hype around it is because, first of all, it's backed by Jeff Bezos, and not that him and Elon Musk are like rivals by any means, but they're constantly like battling who's the richest, who's this, how many billions did that dude lose this week, and he's been dethroned by blah blah blah. But there's a lot of hype around the powers that be behind the ideas, so to speak. But I think it's a very cool. First, I'm going to go on record saying I think it's a really cool approach to the car world. Like it's the IKEA of automotive, right? Like you can go and there will be like Slate hacks, like there are IKEA hacks, because already you can kind of order a bare bones version and then customize it, a million different ways yourself. There's no paint on the vehicle, it's designed to be wrapped, whatever color you want to wrap it. You can change headlights, taillights, you can change, all these other things. But at its core, it's just a bare bones, stripped down blank canvas that is, nowadays, cheap is a relative term. It starts at, I think $27,000 after rebates, et cetera. It's like 20 G's or whatever. But you can kind of do what you want to make it your own. And I love that idea because to me, as somebody who's always, I've owned a lot of different cars, I've always modified 99% of the cars I've owned. I've modified because to me, and we talked about this in the past, it's like sneakers. It's kind of a form of self-expression, right? You don't buy, at least I don't buy cars to impress other people, but I buy them because I think they're cool, and inevitably they become the conversation piece, like we were just talking about with the Masters and everything. And so I think Slate at its core, that's what's causing all the hype, is this bare bones approach to things that just opens up the floodgates for customization.
So, speaking of like customizations, I always feel like customizations in the car world are usually, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they're performance related, not necessarily aesthetics. It feels like the root of like the customizations are like, oh, I added an exhaust, or I added new tires, or I added
new
rims or something.
It is
I think that might be where
slope. And Nick, I'll let you chime in on this, but it's all of the above, and sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's another. But yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I think that your view on that might be a little biased because that's kind of how Erik and I look at most vehicles.
Sure.
But here's the best example of like this Slate thing in the way that it's not necessarily performance oriented, but just like customization as a whole, right? Like I, gas up the Honda Element, talk about it all the time. Like it's my favorite. It's not my favorite vehicle of all time because like there's just other great vehicles out there. But as far as like the customizability of that vehicle, like I've had no seats in it at all. I've had a full bed in there. I've had a full bed and camp setup with, power, like our big anchor brick power and, giant refrigerators underneath the bed for road trips. Like we've had roof boxes on the top. I've had wheels on it, lowered, people lift it. There's just so many different ways that people go about customizing that vehicle. And the downside to that vehicle is that it didn't really catch on and get this like diehard do-it-yourself like maker community behind it until after Honda had stopped making it.
Yeah.
So like,
oh, interesting.
The Slate is actually kind of like starting from the very beginning for that same type of person who like is now looking at their vehicle differently because they've seen, like I have, like when I have the back hatch open or the back, just open, and we're by the ocean and, laying in the back on the bed, have the dog in there, and people walk by, they have so many questions because they, most people that are not familiar with it don't think of a vehicle in that way, right? But I'm coming from, like not wanting to have to drive a converted Sprinter van full time, but wanting to really live out of a Sprinter van and travel the country and the world or whatever. But also coming from, the generation before us where like my uncles used to have the like rooftop tents on their, first generation Toyota, they call them Forerunners. Erik probably remembers what they're called. I can't think of it right now, but like the pop-up, what was that pop-up, like almost like tent canvas cover
on the Forerunners?
Not the Forerunner, the Toyota pickups before the Forerunner.
The Hilux?
The Hilux was like the full truck though, right?
Right.
But that first year that they did like that first generation of Toyota pickups, I'll put pictures of it up here. It had basically like a like, I don't know if it was customized or a factory optional, like kind of like a roof, not really a roof, but almost like a tent that just went above you on those trucks. And that was like mid 80s, I think, maybe early 80s to mid 80s. It was like the first like Toyota pickup, the Back to the Future truck, just right before the Back to the Future came out, where it was like, whoa, like people are taking these and camping and doing all that. So we've done a lot of camping. Before I moved to Monterey, we would come down here for race weekends and we would camp at the track for the entire weekend. So that meant packing everything into our cars or packing our tents on the top of the cars. We varied throughout the years as to what car we were driving. But I think that this starting from scratch gives you a lot more flexibility in what you can do, because ultimately, like I look at most new vehicles and I think I'd probably change a bunch of stuff from that. And I think that the world is kind of getting to that point where it's like, well, I don't want it to look or feel exactly the same as everyone else's version of this.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
A lot of people look at the big displays, the dash in a Tesla, and that becomes the customization piece for them. I want it to look and feel a certain way through the dash. I think Erik and I kind of look at vehicles in a way where it's like, oh, how would I actually make that my own? Like there's all sorts of ways. Like I think we talked about it a few episodes back, but like it really is that like car audio is the gateway drug to all the problems of customizing your vehicles. And I think Slate is kind of like a modern version of just having a, for the car audio files out there, it's going to be a Crutchfield magazine. For the sneakerheads, it's going to be an East Bay catalog. And you're going to look at both of those and you're going to think, oh, these are all the ones I want, and this is what I'm going to do to make it my own.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. No, it makes sense because like even on the website, they have all of those different versions on like the top banner. Like you can click through and see all the different ways that you can customize it. But like for me, I always go to like, I like the black one. I'm like, oh, the all black one. Like, all right, cool. That's the look for me. Where is it? I'm trying to find it now.
Sure.
I forgot what it's called.
Have you thrown down your $50 yet, Jacques?
I have not, but I'm pretty close to doing it. It's
a refundable deposit. I know. Just drop it. Because here's the thing. I have a bad habit, I don't know what it is, but I have a weird thing. When there's like a new hype vehicle that comes out that I'm interested in, I drop a deposit right away. Because if it's fully refundable, what's the big deal? So currently I'm holding deposits on the Scout, on the Slate, on the Myers-Manx, and I feel like that's it. I did have one on the Rivian. Obviously now I own a Rivian, but my point with all this is, it's a $50 deposit, it's a $100 deposit here and there. It's fully refundable if you don't decide to go through with the vehicle. But what it does is it locks you in line early, and that's twofold good reason. You can either be an early adopter, you can get it, you can start modifying it, be one of the first people to have it. If that's, to me, I kind of like having things before other people just because of the conversation that gets sparked in parking lots or whatever. But on the flip side of that, if you are early to the market and there is still a bunch of hype around it and everything, you can take delivery of it, and if it's not really your cup of tea, you can flip it, and a lot of times you
Just
can make a
flip it
little
and
money
sell it.
doing that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I'm not advocating for that, because that goes into the whole, that goes down to, like, I guess the sneaker world would be like the StockX type of thing, where all these people started getting bots and just buying up all the sneakers just specifically to flip them for profit.
Just to
So I'm
flip
not
them. Yeah.
advocating that necessarily. I'm just saying that it gets you that opportunity to at least get whatever it is that's new and hype. And if it's not your thing, typically if the demand's still there, you're going to be able to get out of it very easily, if not make a little bit of money while you're doing it. So
that makes me wonder, would this work in the sneaker world?
The
What do you mean?
Slate,
The deposit.
the interesting. Like if instead of just doing a full-on lottery when the sneakers drop, like if Nike says, hey, we've got this idea, put it out to the crowd, $50 locks you in, the shoe will be out in 6 months or whatever the case may be. You know what? You might have just tapped into something, Nick, because
I'm gonna erase that. This will not be in the final edit. I'm gonna take this out because I don't need to. No, like I think it's a really interesting idea though, and like I 100% agree with you, Eric, on like the reasoning behind it. Maybe we just need to get Jacques a little bit of that wine, and then we'd be right to we already jump ahead to like ordering cars by the end of the episode. We've
already got that.
Yeah.
but like. The one thing that I think about, and like I think the hesitation that I can get to with the Slate, because it's definitely, I have not pre-ordered it, but it's $50. I probably will. I've been playing with the thing for the last week, getting all the different setups and stuff. But like part of me doesn't like giving, of all people, Jeff Bezos $50. Like,
fair enough.
That's my one. Like, I'm gonna hold my ground. Maybe a little longer until I give in.
Here's the genius behind that, and why, people like Bezos have built their businesses, not necessarily saying this was his model with Amazon, etc. forever, but this type of idea is essentially crowdfunding, right? Mm-hmm. Like you put forth, for all practical purposes, it's vaporware until it's a real thing anyway. So if you put enough effort into the presentation of, whatever it is, a vehicle, a sneaker, an electronic device, whatever it is, if you put enough effort into the presentation of it and you get people hyped around it, instead of having to prototype and spend all the money on this and that, you basically spend the money on the marketing side of it early on, put it out to the world, and then you can gauge demand based on how many deposits you've gotten. And not only do you get to gauge the demand, you now also have crowdfunded your R&D for the vehicle or for the shoe or for whatever. It's a genius model, right? Like I don't hate on them for doing that, but I do understand your point. Like, why do we need to be crowdfunding Jeff Bezos? I get it in that regard.
Which is why I kind of once I said that about the sneaker thing, I was like, let me reel that back in. I don't necessarily want to go down that path with Nike, but could it work? Maybe. For
companies that are, and all of them are kind of struggling right now, especially with tariffs and everything that are being implemented and whatnot. Like, sales are down and they're going to continue to probably drop for the foreseeable future. Like, this is an interesting approach to generating revenue for a company, right? So let's say if Nike is struggling to find their way, why not do something like this? Why not say, hey, this is the future. This is what we're going to be doing. Drop your deposit right now instead of having to wake up at 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. and roll the dice on the sneakers app. Like, this will lock you in, and then they generate revenue to go and do whatever they need to do. I feel like it might be an interesting approach. So if they do it, once again, we come up with so many great ideas on this podcast that we need to start a consulting firm. We absolutely have to do that.
Jacques, would you pre-order a pair of Jordans?
I know I've been thinking about this the whole time you mentioned that, and I was trying to think, what could they drop that would make me pre-order them? I would say I probably would have pre-ordered if I had a chance, I would have probably pre-ordered the undefeated 4s.
Mm-hmm.
I would have put down a deposit to ensure that I got a pair of those.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't know what like anything else like super crazy like that. I would like. I don't know if I need
the
it for a
Kobe's
fragment.
that just came out popped into my head. Was that the what was the Kobe, the Kobe 9s?
The elites.
Yeah.
The elites.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like back in the day, I probably would have. Now I don't know if I would. Like I don't think I would. I mean, Travis Scott seems like to be the most obvious thing that I think people would put money down for. Like they would put a deposit down for. Probably some high, like elevated luxury stuff from like Adidas. If they like elevated some Sambas or something, or like really like
some Y3 stuff or something.
Yeah, like really high elevated. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot that I would do it for though.
See, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here because it someone in your position, Jacques, with as much time as you've spent in the sneaker space and as many sneakers as you have, it's hard to not get slightly jaded with this stuff. Like even someone at my level who loves sneakers and has had a few, there's more than the ones you just mentioned that I would absolutely throw down a deposit on. I feel like there's a lot of other people out there that in some ways it's also like a modern version of layaway, right? Like if you can't afford to drop $200 on the day, but if you know that the sneaker's coming out in 2 months and you can drop $50 to hold your place in line and then stack away the cash so that the day that it does drop, you have the money to then finish paying whatever it is, knowing that you don't have to stress about whether you're going to get them or not. You know you're going to get them because you've had a place in line. I feel like it might appeal to more people than we think.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like also I'm trying to get out of thinking like $50 for the Slate is nothing for a $27,000 car.
Sure.
Most cars are 100, 200, 500 deposits, right? A sneaker deposit would be like $10, like $20 or something. So like if I was always guaranteed to get that money back, whether with that shoe I wanted or, credit or something, I'd probably do it a majority of the time if they were actually doing something like that. Now that I think about it, I'm not buying shoes the way I once did. And I'm not like,
Same.
I've never really been somebody to like just resell stuff. Like I've definitely sold things through the years, but like, and I'm, planning on selling more stuff just because I've collected hundreds of sneakers for the last, 20 years. But like that model is actually really interesting now that I think about it. Like there are some shoes, like I would have definitely done that with some of the AE1 Adidas Anthony Edwards colorways where I was like, I really love that colorway. Like, but am I just like, is that just me being old and like I don't want to fight to get a pair of shoes, so I don't even try? Like, just let me put the $10 deposit down and I'll take it.
Paying for convenience.
Yeah.
I sound spoiled right now, but yeah.
I guess a lot of this also conjures up the idea of, if you can't afford the super exclusive sneaker or, nothing like this exists where you can drop a deposit on something like that. There's been a couple of like Nike ID. We mentioned that before we started the show. And I know y'all are going to talk about this here in a second, but that is kind of the Slate approach here, right? Where you can take a quote unquote normal pair of sneakers, go on the website, change the colorways to kind of suit what you want. And now you have a one of one, so to speak, an exclusive sneaker that maybe doesn't have the hype behind it, but you can literally say, hey, like if somebody comes up and says, I love the colorway on those, where did you get those? I designed them myself, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like that is part of the appeal to the Slate too, is it's got crank windows. There's no audio system. It's got like a dock for like a Bluetooth speaker, or you can upgrade that, or you can change the logos on the grill and stuff. And I feel like that kind of Nike ID Slate approach here appeals to a lot of people because not everybody can afford the rare, 911 ST that they're only making a certain number of or whatever. So in this case, they can legit make a one-of-one Slate if they decide to go with a crazy color or a crazy, set of wheels or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so let me add some context for the diehard sneaker people listening to the show that don't understand the car stuff, because Erik will probably relate to this and plenty of car people relate to this, but like Jacques, you might not understand the levels of what I would have normally done to put a stereo in. So like if I was working at a shop and you just came in, you wanted a new CD player or wanted a new, maybe you just want to hook up your phone to a Bluetooth adapter and like be able to listen to stuff. Spend $100 or whatever it is and you're out the door, you're good to go. If you came in and were like, hey, I want something really good, I literally would run all new wiring in your vehicle. I would sound dampen the entire car. Like I would basically tear apart the inside to put it back together in a better form. So like I'm not using any factory wiring whatsoever. I'm using 100% new wiring for all of that stuff, for all your speakers, for all your power, new wires for your amplifiers, like I'm sound deadening your doors, like your trunk, all of that stuff. So like that is the type of customization that is like where people go once you're past that first, you get a CD player and it's like, cool, this sounds great. But like the thing that I'm thinking about that you can probably relate this to is like your camera stuff. Like you have an insane amount of camera equipment, gears, lenses, lighting. Your studio setup is amazing. And like we were joking before we started recording, like you haven't used the DJI Osmo 3 yet, which is like one of my favorite little devices to just carry around every day. Erik was saying he was recording with his today. DJI is going to have to sponsor this segment of the show, but like it's like one of those things where like when you're passionate about something and it like becomes like just your obsession, your livelihood, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
You're so much further down the path from like the casual consumer that just steps into it. And I don't think there's a relatable scenario in the sneaker world other than like Nike ID, right? Like Nike ID is the closest thing, or, Adidas has had theirs and New Balance has done their stuff. But I don't think that the sneaker consumer necessarily looks at a shoe and thinks I'm going to swap all of this stuff out for better stuff. We're just now getting to the point where like Move insoles have captured a corner of the market to like really get people to think like, I mean, you and I have joked about it for the last couple of years off and on, but it's like, I don't wear Jordan 1s or Jordan 3s without Move insoles in them. Like I'm too old. My feet hurt, like my back hurts, like whatever excuse you need. Like it's a $50-$60 investment, but it takes a shoe that I love to wear that is not really that comfortable by today's standards and makes it comfortable by today's standards. So yeah, my Jordans might have cost $200 and my insoles might have cost another 50 or 60, but I'm way happier. I'm $500 happy at that level wearing a pair of shoes that I really love and feeling a little bit of comfort. And I think that's where this Slate thing is really interesting, because you're going to have people to your point, you're going to look at the all black blacked out version and you're going to be like, this is it. And then you're going to see like Erik go, well, I stripped it down and bought nothing on it and then did all the stuff. And you'd be like, oh, like that shifts like the way we think about what can be done with a vehicle in like ways we probably don't even know yet. Like I think that's the thing that I'm excited about this. Once I get past my giving $50 to Bezos
to Jeff
problem.
Bezos. It all goes back to, kind of what Jacques said, like modifying cars. And your interpretation of that is always just to make it perform better, to make it go faster, etc. What I kind of touched on at the beginning is it is really dependent upon what kind of car it is and what your goal with it is, because there are certain genres of cars that are specifically full-on aesthetics. There's no like performance element to it or whatever. And one of the things, like I grew up around lowriders. The lowrider culture in El Paso, Texas and LA, those were the meccas of lowriders back in the day. They still are. And, that car culture is now expanded globally. Like Japan has got some of the craziest, cars in the world. Their lowrider scene is insane. They've also,
Yeah.
if you've never Googled like Bosazoku or Kaido style cars, do that. It
I
is
literally just text that to you
it is
guys.
did you really?
Yep.
It is. Oh, you did. It is insane. Like these cars will have. There's no functionality behind them. They will have
Yeah.
insane body kits that are like the front splitter's like 3 feet long, and the rear exhaust is angled at 45 degrees and goes 6 feet up in the air.
Yeah.
Serves no purpose other than it's their form of self-expression. And
Yep.
That's
so,
insane.
in that regard, it's like you can modify a car in a number of different ways. And in the sneaker world, the only thing that even comes close to something like this that just popped into my head is like I have a pair of the Sean Wotherspoon Asics, where it came with like
Yeah.
3 or 4 different colors of the side logo that you could just Velcro on and off, or 3 or 4 different colors of laces. The left sneaker and the right sneaker's colorways are different. There's corduroy on it. There's there's different materials involved and stuff. And so the only thing that I could think of, that reminded me of that was like these cars that we were just talking about, where it's so wild and extreme, or it's like even like the Nike, the different, like the Kobe what does, or the SB what does, or whatever, like where
Yeah.
it's just so out there. It's not for any sort of performance at all. It's literally just to be like, yo, what are those? And so it's the same thing in the car world. Like, it's just a form of self-expression.
This kind of reminds me of like some of the stuff that Dom would do when he would like put
Mm-hmm.
like a Fear of God Nike sole with like an Adidas Samba upper or Adidas shell toe upper, and just like
Right.
mix and match all of these different pieces of shoes, but make it all look really, really dope. But at the end of the day, like, oh, okay, I see the vision. So I can see that. Like, I think Slate is great. I do.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant because I think I have that. I'm like a suburban mom where I'm like, only 150 miles.
Sure.
What if I run out of power?
Well,
So
I'm glad you brought that up, because we've sung its praises so far, but there are some downsides to it. Like, it's not going to work for everybody. The 52 kilowatt hour battery pack is tiny for all practical purposes, and 150 mile range is probably generous once you start adding weight. Like if you're going to use it as a truck and you're going to try to go run errands at Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever it is. I'm saying that because I went and picked up a bunch of lumber today in my Rivian. And in a Rivian, it doesn't really make a huge difference. Just a small load of lumber like that isn't going to cut your range by a ton, because it's got a pretty large battery pack. But when you've got something this small or whatever, that 150 mile range, if you throw 300 pounds worth of lumber in the back or something, you probably cut it by 20%. And so is that enough? Probably, for most people that live in suburban areas or in urban areas. But if you live, kind of like we do out, I'm not 30 minutes from Lowe's, but like 15, 20 minutes from the closest Lowe's. I'm 30, 40 minutes from like Dallas proper, from the city, so to speak. I'm in like this fusion of like country suburbia. It's very unique. So I need something with decent range, if I'm going to go electric, which is why I've got the Rivian, etc. And I also always have some sort of gas-powered car in the garage too if I need to go long distances in a pinch. So in that regard, I think that's going to get rid of a few different potential clients, but it's also not really... This truck doesn't lend itself to be like a road trip monster. You're not probably going to take it... If you are going to take it camping, you're going to take it camping locally. You're not really driving to the national parks across the country in this. And if you are, you're stopping a lot to charge. So in that regard, that's one of the downsides. To some people, maybe they don't have the creativity, maybe they don't have the desire to modify something, and so they're just looking to get into a cheap form of transportation, and they're going to be like, well, wait, 27 grand, like, and I have to roll my windows down manually, and I don't even have like an audio system. No, I'm going to go buy whatever, entry level Toyota or Hyundai or whatever there is for
Yeah.
comparable price. So it isn't, it's like anything out there. It's not for everybody, but I do think it hits on a corner of the market that doesn't really have any competition at the moment. And look, the other side of it is I really love that there's that Slate is an anagram for Tesla, and the whole like rivalry that they're talking about behind the scenes and everything like that. Just the kind of little, I don't know, anecdotal things like that always.
Little ribbing.
It's
Yeah.
like
Ribbing
it's like
happening.
the automotive version of the pump up and air out. We can see it coming, right? Like the
Mhm.
competitiveness
Yeah.
is good for everybody. But one thing
Absolutely.
that I think is really interesting about what you brought up about the range, though, like we don't have like an entry level electric vehicle. Like that is like by far the cheapest I've seen straight out of the gate in America. There's a lot of others out there, but like 27 seemed like, I think even the base Model 3 is like 34 or something, right? So if they're
Yeah, I
undercutting
think it's
Tesla
pretty
by that
expensive.
much,
Yeah.
I'd think of it more of like a, what's that? The Nike Air Max LTD, which is like that
Oh,
big
yeah,
bubble
yeah.
shoe that usually
Yeah.
sells for about 70, $80 at Foot Locker. Like that's not for like the sneakerhead consumer, but it's the gateway drug to Air Max as a brand, as a
As a brand.
lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
hopefully that, or at least the way I see it, Slate might be taking that approach. Like, can we get people into electric vehicles? Because once you started talking about the roll down windows, it's like, well, this is just all stuff that I would have already been thinking about customizing anyway. But now I could see Amazon's building a whole, like you're going to have sellers creating all sorts of DIY stuff and,
Yeah.
3D
It's going to
printed
be
stuff
the
to
app
like,
store for Slate, basically.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say
It's
there are a couple of there are some entry level EVs. The first thing that came to mind was like the Chevy Bolt, which I think
Yeah.
starting price is probably around the same as the Slate, but it's I don't want to knock it because everything serves its purpose, but the Bolt isn't exciting. Like,
Yeah.
matter of fact, why do you call it the Bolt? Like, I guess because it's electric lightning bolt or whatever, but it's not fast. It's not that cool. It's just a form of transportation. There's nothing really inherently fun about it. So in that regard,
yeah.
for people like us that like fun things, that like customizing things, it's a no-brainer. I'm not buying a Chevy Bolt over a Slate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are people who really don't care and they just need to get places, and that's why cars like the Chevy Bolt exist, I think. And so, it goes back to what I was saying about there's something for everybody out there. And even in the sneaker world, Air Monarchs are always going to be synonymous with like 65-year-olds in Corvettes, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to be. They're great for lawn work, by the way, just side note. But
Side note, just putting that out there.
just putting that out there. But there's always going to be something for somebody, and not everything is going to appeal to everybody. But I do like what they're doing with, just it's kind of a weird new fun era in the automotive space
Yeah.
where it went for such a long period of time. Cars were so mundane, and they were just becoming forms of transportation, unless you could afford 150, 200,000 plus. Then you could get into the fun sports cars and the Porsches and the this and the that. But for the longest time, the average person didn't have anything really inherently cool to drive. And I think over the last probably 5 to 10 years, that's changed, and it is changing more and more as as we're seeing, month to month at this point. So it's an exciting time for for the car world, and hopefully this lights a fire in the next generation so that we don't end up with a world of kids my son's age that don't really care about this stuff. You know what
Don't
I
care
mean? We
about it.
talked a bit
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
on a previous episode, but you gotta reinvent things to keep it all alive for the next generation, and this is a nice approach.
Yeah. This is really like it's interesting. Like the more I think about it and the more I hear you guys talk about it, it's like this is like the anti-Tesla. It's almost like the antithesis of Tesla.
Yeah.
Because Tesla is, you don't need all of that. You don't need to change anything. it's perfect the way it is. I made you a great car. Everybody's car can look the same. You can have a different color, but essentially it's the same. You're going to have the same rims. And this is just like opposite of that. Hey, we're going to give you an electric car, but you can customize everything. You can make it your own, make it feel personal to you. Because something that I noticed now is like everyone in Santa Clarita has a Tesla. It's just like it feels like everyone's driving a Model Y out here. Partly of that is I live in California. That's just going to happen, and I live in LA. That's just the LA culture, and the people here. They're very forward thinking in that regard. So the electric car is kind of like a thing, but it all looks the same. And I started to get more and more annoyed the more I see them. Like, damn, every car looks exactly like my car, and so I don't know what I would do to customize it to make it different, because the stuff that I've seen, I'm like, all right, no, I'm not doing that. But, there's got to be some things to it to make it look nice.
Our buddy Victor Carrillo, you got to see his Model Y. He may not have it anymore, but he had a Model Y with a dope body kit. It was lowered, had a dope set of wheels, and it actually looked pretty cool. So, I mean, I'm not the biggest Tesla fan for a variety of reasons, but if you want to make it your own, Jacques, I can help you with that. I can kind of steer you down that road,
Yeah, sounds like a teaser for a build on the podcast.
Yeah,
the Tesla build.
It is interesting.
I'm down.
And I know we're running out of time here, but you're talking about how there are Teslas everywhere in Santa Clarita, and it is because you live in LA and stuff. It's so true. Like, having moved back to Dallas now, man, it's like, well, sorry, let me rephrase that. Back to Texas, close to Dallas. You go into Dallas, you see a lot of Teslas, you see a lot of EVs, you see a lot of this and that. Out where I live, out in kind of like I said, suburban country fusion or whatever, like, I get so many questions about my Rivian out here because you just don't see them. And it's interesting because people that ask the questions, some of them are you can tell they're asking just because they want to find something negative to say, because they're driving an F-350 dually, or they're some sort of big diesel truck that is more popular than anything out here. And so there's those guys that just like to I don't know, just talk shit, for lack of a better term, about the fact that I'm driving an electric truck. It's not a real truck, blah blah blah, this and that. But then there are some people that you can tell, that are genuinely interested, and it's almost like they'll look around before they ask the question to make sure that none of their homies are listening, because they don't want to be seen asking genuine questions about an electric truck, because it's just not the thing to have out here. So it is very interesting, based on where you live, how those trends kind of form,
Yeah. Yep. Rivians are starting to get really popular out here too. I'm starting to see a lot more of those. It's more the S than the T. It seems like. But again, that's very LA-ish kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, this is
good
a
show,
fun
gents.
Good both balanced sneaker and car side of things here on this one. But we've got a lot of cool things kind of in the pipeline now. What is it, May? So I guess we're in the second quarter of the year. A lot of stuff that we're building towards and everything. So, I just, as always, want to thank all of y'all for listening to us, those that continue to support. Some of our biggest fans who are hypercritical about certain people's microphones. Peter, thank you for that.
Yeah. We need the feedback.
No, we need the feedback. Yeah. That's how we grow.
Appreciate
how we get bigger and better. So thank you guys again for those that have stuck by us since day one, and to all the folks that are new to this. Thank you guys for tuning in, and got a lot of other stuff planned.
All right. Well, this is a super awkward ending, but
I
after
didn't
that pause,
for it to be.
But whatever. No, it's fine. It's great. We thought you were going to wrap us out, but we'll leave it. We'll leave it in. We'll leave it in so the audience can feel the awkwardness.
See, this is where you can tell it's 11 p.m. my time over here, because I thought I was leading into something where you were going to close us out, and then we got.
I thought you were closing.
Dead air.
I thought you were closing, but
no,
it's fine. Look, we're out of here. Eric's got his wine, and he's winding down for the night. As soon as he said he was sipping wine, I was like, oh, yeah, he's going to be asleep by the time we get to the end of the podcast. Anyway, I haven't ordered a Slate. Neither has Nick. That may change before the next episode, but we'll see what happens. As always, guys, we appreciate you. Make sure you follow us on all the platforms and all the places. Leave us great comments and recommend us to your friends. And, just put it on in the background while you're at work. We appreciate that. All right, y'all.
Yes.
Jacques, that's Erik. That's Nick. And we'll see you guys soon.
That is how you end a podcast. Thank you.
Peace.